In this episode, Archita and I reflect on the past 3 episodes of the 906 Season 1, where we spoke to Ashlesha, Elsbeth, and Andrea. And we also weave in some of our own experiences, including what it's been like to be traveling career women who also want to keep breastfeeding our babies, to reflecting on our upbringing and the role that our parents have had in making us feel unstoppable. We also talk about goal setting and the importance of being bold in both our professional and our personal endeavors. Welcome to the 906. I'm Meha and
Hi, I'm Archita Fritz.
We are your hosts for the 906, a podcast where we elevate the stories of extraordinary women in our community.
Mia, so 2020, a new decade, and our first Real Talk episode for this decade and this year.
Happy New Year, Archita.
Yes, Happy New Year.
2020, here we come.
Yes, I'm so excited because in a few weeks, I get to see you.
Oh my God.
And we get to be on stage together talking about what we love to do, which is share the stories of all these amazing women we've had an opportunity to interview on the first season, essentially, of the 906.
Yeah, and I'm excited to share that with our audience at the Podcast Movement conference here in LA in just a few weeks. And also going back and thinking about season 1, Archita, I mean, we still have a few more episodes to go, but I know the last 3 episodes, we had some pretty powerful interviewees with really unique stories.
Yes, we had Ashlesha, the major doctor from India. We had Elsbeth, a coach, an executive coach, a woman who's really climbed and been at the top of the corporate ladder. And of course, Andrea, most recently, who was an ER physician up in the Upper Peninsula of Michigan. Some fascinating stories, and their journeys were just very different.
And I like, though, their journeys are very different, but I also feel that they all have elements that we all can connect to in some way, that we can all relate to, whether it's having different identities in the work life or in home life, whether it's figuring out how to raise young kids while also trying to be successful in your career, or even figure out how to accept your support system and not feel guilty about leveraging that support system around you.
I think the support system is one of the common threads across these past 3 episodes, whether it be Ashlesha's, the support system she found in her husband and her extended family, with Elsbeth, with her mentors, and with Andrea, with her husband as well. I think that was so critical. And one of the key takeaways I've had as I think about these 3 episodes is, how do we go about building that support system? How do we lean into that support system? And how do we have that give and take with that support system that we build over time to help us achieve and realize the dreams we have for ourselves?
That give and take piece that I know Andrea called it out, and kind of that the inner support system we give to them, but we also have to be okay with taking, that really hit home for me too, Archita, because I think about my own relationship with one of my key people in my support system, my husband. And one of the defining moments in my career was actually right after we got married. We had just moved as newlyweds to California because I heard that you had a new job here. For me, though, I had a great career opportunity to go to Colombia for a few months. So here we were newlyweds. We lived together for about a month, and then I was off to South America for 3 months, right? And
so you're just newlyweds, you were in Colombia. What was that like?
So from a day-to-day basis, it was very, let me put it this way, fulfilling, in the sense that I was using my Spanish skills, living and working in a Spanish-speaking country, to really understand the healthcare system for a particular project I was working on, focusing on gestational diabetes. From a personal life perspective, though, again, being newlyweds, my husband was all the way in California. He was almost starting out a new life here together because we just moved to California from New York City.
I can't even imagine what that must have been like, being newlyweds, navigating your new life into separate countries while you both were pursuing your own dreams and really being there for each other. That takes a lot of courage. There's another thing that really hit home for me in Andrea's episode, and that was, career women being new moms in the workforce. So first-time moms or new moms in the workforce, and how we just have to juggle different aspects of things. And one of the very basic things being whether or not to breastfeed. And Mia, we have shared a lot of stories in the middle of the night as we were pumping in some godforsaken parts of toilets and the back of buses and closets and cubicles around the world, basically, about what that felt like. And it was just it really became so real for me when Andrea shared, being an ER physician and having to sometimes decide between, okay, do I need to be there to, you're in the ER, you're trying to save lives, you're taking care of really sick people, but also here she is trying to make sure that she can, fulfill what she wants to do as a mother, which is one of the things was breastfeeding her kid, and just taking that time and what that meant. That really hit home for me because we've kind of traveled and we've breastfed. Now for me, it's going to be my third one, and everybody chooses to do different things, but we chose to breastfeed our babies. It's hard. I remember we both have a common story of pumping in Tel Aviv in the same university. I think it was probably the same room
The same room.
because we both went there for classes for our MBAs.
Yeah, so one note that you mentioned, again, thinking about Andrea's experience, and she realized she had to take that time out for herself. She had to ask for that time to, go out and pump even when she's working in the ER. And when she asked for it, people, of course, were willing to support her. And so I think it's not even just in the context of breastfeeding, right? But it's in the context of us wanting to be able to be there for our children in any way that we need to outside of the work life, right? We need to not feel shy, or we need to not feel afraid to really ask for that time, because no one else is going to be there to tell us to do it, to tell us to go for it. It has to come from ourselves. On the pumping in crazy places piece, yeah, Archita. Okay, so when I came back to work after my first baby, after my maternity leave, and I feel very fortunate actually. In our workplace, we have there are 2 rooms to pump on every floor.
Wow.
2 rooms, and they're actually very comfortable rooms, right? It's almost like a relaxing break so you can pump. And then I think about other experiences when we're say traveling, the LAX airport. Yes, there's one room that in the Delta terminal where you can pump, but I have to say, I was standing in line there, I remember last year, waiting to pump, and in front of me was a TSA worker. And she was also waiting for someone else. And I realized that she literally has this is her workplace, my line of work. It's like made me not take for granted what I have, because in so many women in this country, around the world, just to be able to breastfeed, it's not that easy just to be able to keep pumping when you go back to work. So you really have to appreciate when you've been given opportunities so you can kind of leverage them.
Yeah, I mean, you have to really appreciate. Yeah, that's phenomenal because just even the concept of pumping here in Europe is sometimes pumping is just not very common yet here in Europe.
Oh,
People do pump, but because of the way the healthcare system is, a lot of women get to stay, have a choice to stay home for the first full year. So I still am struggling, my third child in, to find the best way to store milk, freeze it, and it creates so much anxiety. I remember my first pregnancy, I had pumped a lot of milk. Like I thought it was enough for 3 to 6 months essentially. I mean, I had pumped a lot of milk, and I was traveling a lot after I had started working, and there was this one week where I we thought we had enough milk for at least 2 weeks based on how our son was drinking at that time. But Dave calls me up and is like, you know what? There is no milk left. And this was my first kid, right? So, and there's nothing wrong with formula at all. But I had this in my mind, like I wanted to only have him have my milk. And I had so much anxiety because I was like, how the heck am I going to get my milk to him? And I had like, a ridiculous amount of milk with me that I had pumped and frozen in the hotel there. I literally called up every courier, I remember that night, to find a way. And the only way was paying 600 euros to this taxi driver to drive within Germany 4.5 hours to get milk to my home. And I was like, you know what? I'm being ridiculous. I need to let go. And yes, he's going to get formula tonight, and it's not the end of the world.
yes. So, okay, I really appreciate the place where I work. They have partnered with this company called Milk Stork. And my first business trip, I remember it was a sales meeting in Austin, Texas last year, first business trip away from my baby. I used milk stork and I was able to put the milk in this frozen, in this container full of ice and then just ship it back to my baby. So,
We spoke about this, and you know what frustrates me is I really wish we had it here.
yeah,
That's what we need, because I think then mums would make the choice to go back to work sooner.
yeah.
It's and this is the thing. I mean, even now with my third pregnancy, we're thinking as I my kid starts going to daycare here soon, I'm pumping milk, etc. But just the whole concept of, like, thawing frozen milk and feeding the baby. Some places are happy to do it. Some places just look down on you. It's like, why are you not home and feeding your baby milk?
Yes, what needs to happen is that as women, we need to have options. Like, if we can have the option to stay at home and be with their baby for X amount of time, longer than ideally 6 weeks, right? Paid in the US, longer than that. Or if we want to go back to work, if that you have the facilities available everywhere publicly to be able to keep pumping if you choose to breastfeed your baby. Like the choice is what we need.
Yes, and the thing is that if as a society we embrace the fact that, hey, the mom is taking time off, and again, it's what you said, the choice. No matter the choice we make, the if the infrastructure around there supports those choices, that would just be
Ideal.
fabulous
Yes.
and really ideal. Yeah.
And actually, one more note on that, though. Okay, so going back to the example, so we both studied abroad in Tel Aviv. By the way, you totally inspired me to go to Tel Aviv when you told me about your experience there for your MBA. So in Tel Aviv, I remember sitting in my class, and it was class with local Israeli students, right, as well as some international. And I remember there was, and that time my baby was 6 months old. I remember there was a fellow student, Israeli student, a mom. She brought her 3-month-old baby to class and she would feed him in class. Oh, and the fact that it was so normal and so natural, and if even if the baby made a sound, like it was, no one really paid attention because it was accepted that you can bring your baby to class and breastfeed in class when you're doing your MBA. And I went up to my classmate and I told her that I was so impressed and that I felt like she was a trailblazer. And she almost laughed because she literally didn't think it was a big deal. That is the type of society we need. I wish I wish more societies were like that, so accepting, because again, that's part of what we need as an extended support system.
Yeah, then you have the courage to make the choice you want and live that choice. Talking about choices, Meha, and talking about choices and the society we are in, let's talk about Ashlesha's episode about being a woman and being a girl growing up in India.
Hi, everyone. My name is Olivia Cream. If you are a corporate girly and you are struggling, you're feeling stuck, maybe you're feeling underpaid, overqualified, you're struggling with your boss, or bigger yet, you're even trying to clearly articulate what it is that you want from your corporate career, I am the coach for you. So if you're ambitious and you've got goals to accomplish and you want to accomplish them quickly, check out my website, oliviacream.com. I would love to help you reach your goals.
Hi, everybody. I'm Archita Fritz, your other host of the Embracing Only podcast. If you're ready to leave corporate or you've changed a couple of corporate jobs and want to start a profitable side brilliance, you've made the decision, but you feel unsure of the next steps, here's how I can help you. I can guide you through a successful transition to entrepreneurship to help turn those ideas into profit. So reach out to me on LinkedIn or visit me on architafritz.com to accelerate your empowered transitions. Now, back to the episode.
Archita, I know you spent what, first 17, 18 years of your life in India. And I know actually you've mentioned to me before that it's you and your sister that were growing up, and you also felt like your parents really made you both strong. So what was your growing up years
Yeah,
like?
I just, I still remember the words Ashlesha said, right? She said, my parents were radical thinkers. It just, it still, it shakes me to my core when
Hmm.
I think about it, because the fact that they were radical enough, that she thought they were radical because they let her make her own choices. Isn't that crazy? Like
Yes.
we and it still exists. I mean, this, I'm not going to, shy away from the fact that there are lots of societies out there where women don't have, and we know this for a fact, that
Hmm.
don't have the ability to make their own choices at all. And even in India, in my own like community that I grew up in, there were women who didn't have the ability to make their own choices. Their husbands were picked for them. Their school was decided for them, or the lack of going to school was decided for them. I mean, basically, their path was decided like the day they were born, right? And I just never felt that. I never felt that because
Right.
my parents never let me feel that way. Because if I were to use Ashlesha's words, were radical thinkers in the sense that they just believe that girl or boy, you need to have the same ability to make the choices you need to make.
In your life. Yep.
Yeah. Yeah. So just, it's interesting. And
Yeah. Is there any specific experience you remember, Arjun, that in your childhood?
I mean, and the one of the choices I think about is, yeah, where I went to school, right? When I went to university, I had a choice to go to university in India, but like in eighth grade, you kind of have to make these decisions in India for many different reasons. And my parents were just like, what is it that you'd want to do? And I was just very honest with them. I'm like, hey, good, bad, or indifferent, I just don't think I'm going to be able to cut it in like engineering school here in India. I'd really like to give SATs a shot and
Wow.
go to the US.
Wow.
And they were behind me like 800%, whether it be classes to study for the SATs, help with like, developing and sharpening my resume per se, whatever that was, they were behind me like, 800% to help me go down that path. I had the opportunity then to again leave home at 17 with no mom or dad with me, to another country, and start school there, because they really empowered me with that choice right from eighth grade, which was pretty amazing.
And that parental support system, I think now as wives, right? We have husbands who we often refer to as our support system. We also have kids, but the parental support system has played such an key influential role for me too in my growing up years. So one example for me, I just thought I spent the summer after sophomore year of college, so I was 20 years old, in Honduras and Costa Rica. And it was for this volunteer engineer project. And I remember when I told my parents that I wanted to apply for this opportunity as a student volunteer engineer back in the time before easy access to communication, right? Internet cafes is where you went to email your parents. It's really hard to make a phone call. But they fully supported me, right? And there, I remember when I was there for 2 months, summer after sophomore year, there'd be weeks that went by without me picking up the phone to call them. Yet I never felt that I couldn't do something that I put my mind to because they were fully behind my crazy ideas of what I wanted to do. As parents also, I feel that I want to make sure I tell my kids that the sky is literally the limit in what they want to do and not plant seeds of doubt.
Mia, you could not have said anything better. I mean, we as parents, we just have to be so careful about not planting seeds of doubt, because
Hmm.
then that limits kids from making bold choices. Talking about being bold, Elspeth, our other guest on this in the last three episodes, her whole focus was on being bold and taking risks.
Yes.
And it's just fascinating, whether it be, her expat life over in Asia, or even her journey to motherhood took a lot of courage. It was just really fascinating to hear how she has navigated all of the, she's navigated being bold through all of the risks she's taken in her career, and also in raising her family as well.
And I also liked hearing Elspeth talk about not only her experiences, but I feel like she gave very specific examples of what we could do to put some of those bold ideas into reality. Like she mentioned, like figuring out life's quadrants.
Yes, I love that. I love that because she spoke about uh, goal setting, and this is such a great time to talk about it. Right, the beginning of the year, we're all thinking about what do we want to accomplish, but one of the things my husband and I do, what Dave and I do every year, is we do a family goal planning session. Of course, our kids don't contribute much right now because, their biggest goal, as I asked Arik the other day, was to play with his trains, which is fine. That's good. He has a goal. That's good. But we do this goal planning exercise. But what Elspeth gave me was an opportunity to be even more deliberate in how I plan it. Because today, yes, we focus on, okay, personal, professional, etc. But she spoke about, this, defining what your four quadrants are, and knowing that as a family, how do you move forward in each of those quadrants. It does not mean necessarily that it's just me moving forward professionally, but together, Dave and I moving forward professionally in, like, say, the work quadrant, for instance. So we're really taking the time this year as we define our goals to be more deliberate. And this other thing she said, which has really stuck with me, which is dream on paper like you have no time and money constraints. Because the
Mm,
minute you put a timeline and you focus so much on the how of, oh, how can we do this? How is this going to happen? Which I'm be honest with you, Meha, I do a lot of, or I have done a lot of in this goal planning sessions in the past with David, because he has this like crazy idea, and I'm just like, whoa, 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 back off. Like, how are you going to do this? Because I'm like this activator. I'm like, okay, I want to do it, but how are we going to do it? But
right.
sometimes it's more about just being so clear about what it is that you want to accomplish, and then taking the steps towards the what, versus spending hours on, deconstructing why and how that may
And
or may
how?
not happen.
Yeah. So focus on the what, and then the how will come.
Exactly, exactly. And it's not like you just let it,
No.
you let
Yeah.
it out there, but you're subconsciously thinking about it. So you act on it in different ways. You talk about it with people, like the podcast, for instance, right? We wanted to do it, but I think when we first started talking about it, we really got into a lot of the nitty gritty. And then you made that phone call, and we were just like, okay, what is it that we want to accomplish? Let's go do it. And yes, we had to get to the nitty gritty at points, but we constantly have to keep reminding ourselves on, you know, what is it that we are here? What is it that we're trying to do via this podcast, which is deliver great content of stories of women that really inspire us to inspire others around us.
Exactly. So I have to tell you another one of my goals, Archita. Um, putting it out there, this is going to happen. So I decided that I want to be super fit, right? So post my two kids now. And I decided on the what that I'm going to do that. I signed up in October for a Spartan race. So a Spartan race, some of you may have heard,
Yes.
basically an obstacle course, right? I did make my husband sign up with me and a couple other friends. So that's happening in October. So now I have to figure out, okay, how am I going to get there? But I do feel glad that I put that pen to paper. I bought that ticket to run the Spartan race, and then I will keep you posted on my progress.
That's awesome. That is one of the hardest races ever. And I love that you leaned on your support system to keep you accountable, because that's another key part of goal
Yes.
planning.
Yes.
You can write goals and that's great, but one of the apps I use, which I love for anybody out there, it's called Brian Tracy's Goal Wizard. For every single goal, it asks you, why are you doing this role? This why are you putting pen to paper for this goal? What has kept you from achieving this goal in the past, and what are you going to do to celebrate when you have achieved this goal, and who is going to hold you accountable to this goal? And I think that's so critical. The last two pieces is having, the more you put your goal out to the world, the more real it becomes, because you have more people rooting for you to achieve that goal. And then once you've achieved it, to actually reflect and celebrate that goal. Because
Yes.
sometimes we're like, check and we move on.
The
But the check,
celebration piece. Hmm.
yes, because it took a lot of blood, sweat, and tears. I mean, think about your MBA, or my executive MBA. I mean, this was years in the making. 2 years just went by, right? And I literally was like, Dave, like, I had written down in my goal planning guide, how are we going to celebrate as a weekend away? And
Wow.
it took me longer than I had hoped to make that happen for many different reasons. 4 months after graduation, 6 months after graduation, we had the opportunity to be in Michigan. And we leaned on our support system there, like Dave's family, to help us realize this, where we went and took time off and we did 4 days, and it was just great because we could celebrate it. And it was so important because I could relive what it felt like, and how we were able to achieve that through 2 kids, through 2 pregnancies, to then know that any other goal now is going to be that much more achievable.
Love it. That's awesome.
So we had we had 3 really inspiring women that could really motivate us as we're putting our goals together. So to all of our listeners out there on the 906, what is that one goal you're going to go after in 2020? And how are you going to crush that goal?
Thank you, everyone, for joining us on this episode of Real Talk with Meha and Archita. We look forward to having you tune in on the rest of Season 1 of the 906. To learn more about our podcast, check us out at the906.com. The 906 is produced by Meha Chiraya and Archita Fritz. Subscribe to us on your favorite podcast platform to tune in and hear the stories that'll elevate and inspire you.